Thank you.
Yeah, this time of year I think it's good.
Without the stick, or is that the original way they played it?
Well, you can play it with a stick or the motor. It's called the drone style. You can play it with the chicken. You can play the game such as this. You can go out to the chicken coop and just pluck a feather and play that. And if I may introduce myself to all of you, I am Mrs. Elizabeth Woolley. You may know my husband, Mr. Eden Woolley. Quite the man here in our community. He was among the first of the councilmen in 1849 who was a driving force of the township. And he was a good man. He was a banker, he was a surveyor of the roads, he was a farmer, and also he was a man of community. Our door was always open to the community whenever a friend was in need. As a matter of fact, my brother, Edward Williams, who has a store just down the road, the finest store in Ocean Township, and if you go and tell him that, he'll take 5 cents off the next purchase. He showed me his ledger book, and he says, Elizabeth, look at what your husband has done. He paid off accounts for people who needed money to purchase groceries, and there it says Mr. Eden Woolley paid in full. Mr. Eden Woolley paid for this gentleman in full, so he was a good man, quite a good man. He will not be here today, unfortunately. He is with my youngest daughter, Sarah Lavinia, at the store preparing for our dinner tonight. So would you like to hear some more? Absolutely. Back in the Civil War period, there was a gentleman by the name of Stephen Foster. Stephen Foster was, I suppose you could call him the hit maker of the era. He made hit after hit after hit. And one of them, you might know this song. I heard some of you singing along. You do know this song. Wonderful. Perhaps one more. Let me see if I could do one more. This is called the Boatman's Dance, another quite popular song from the era. Beginning with an L. Not quite.
Okay.
No.
Then you have to refresh my memory.
Now this is actually called a mountain dulcimer.
Dulcimer.
It's a mountain dulcimer. So this was born in as far back as the 1730s in the Appalachian Mountains. Now, as my great aunt Phoebe Woolley has told me, she said that this is from a time when America didn't go from sea to shining sea, it went from sea to the mountains. That was the 13 original colonies. And there were settlers, there were German settlers, there were Scottish settlers and Irish settlers who went up the mountain to live. Now, who in the right mind would want to live in the mountains? Don't you want to live here in the towns with civilization? Or would you want to go live up with the bears? No, I don't think you want to. So there was a young lady, she was about your age. She was from Ireland, traveling with her family, and she had a fiddle with her. It was the most prized possession in the world. And as the cart, the wagon, the family wagon is bouncing up and down, because when you're going up the mountains, there's no road. It's nothing but rocks. It's bouncing up and down, and the fiddle fell out and it crashed to the ground. How do you think she felt?
Horrible.
Horrible! She felt terrible. But one of the German settlers said, you know what? I remember your instrument. I know instruments from my country as well. We have one called the German Scheithold, which looks like an awful tramp sweater looking thing. And he said, I'll take what knowledge I have from your fiddle and I'll make something new. And that is how the mountain dulcimer was born. And this is something that forged such a culture in the Appalachian Mountains, such a culmination of the Scots, the Irish, and the Germans. They formed various types of music, such as bluegrass, such as folk music, and also what's the type of music where the gentleman always sings about losing his wife, losing his house, and losing his dog? Oh, it's called country. That's right, it's called country. Like where if you play it backwards, he gets the dog back, he gets the house back, and he gets the wife back. But whether he gets his beer back or not, or moonshine, whatever they call it down there. But before we begin our walk today, there is one song I would like to share with you, quite a wonderful song that it puts into perspective the Civil War. It is a song called Brother, My Brother, and it goes like this. Brother, my brother, one blue and one gray, will meet upon a quiet field, the morn of Judgment Day. Brother, my brother, God has heard your battle call. Now he'll watch his precious children learn how to stand, learn how to fall. And his eyes will look away, for his heart will so be torn, as his fields of gold turn scarlet for the rage of battle born. And the silence of the night will be broken with the cries of the ones who've been forgotten on a quiet field where honor lies. Give me now a splendid sun with all its light full clear. Give me now a gentle autumn before the dying of the year. Give me a field of unbloodied grass while I can still see far. Give me one night on a river and one unfailing star. Brother, my brother, one blue and one gray, we'll meet upon a quiet field, the morn of Judgment Day. Brother, my brother, God has heard your battle call. Now how he'll watch his precious children learn how to stand, learn how to fall. Are we ready? I believe we are ready to begin.
Welcome everyone to our 7th annual Ghost Walk. And I want to congratulate you on your good judgment in spending this afternoon with us. And the Mets don't play till later, and the Giants don't play till tomorrow, and the sun is shining. I mean, what more could we want, right? This year's Ghost Walk features local stories of the Civil War. So all of the ghosts that you're going to meet were actual characters who lived in Monmouth County or in New Jersey and have a story to tell about their role and New Jersey's role in the Civil War, and there are some surprises. For the children, this is not a scary ghost walk. All of our ghosts are actors, and many of them are only a few years older than you are. There are high school students and a few adults and a few professionals. As a matter of fact, those of you, when you go inside, you will be meeting our 16th president, Abraham Lincoln, and his wife, Mary. I just want you to get ready so you'll be solemn and respectful enough of this presidential visit. So the way that this works, for those of you who haven't been to a ghost walk before, is we have two parts to the ghost walk. The first part, not the first part, one part is inside, and you will meet Abraham and Mary Lincoln there at a reception hosted in their honor. The other half of you will go outside with our guides. This is Mary Woolley, and what happened to your mom? Here she is.
Right here.
And Elizabeth Woolley, whom you've already met. Elizabeth and Mary lived in the Woolley House in the day, right? So they're going to tell you a little bit about their story of the house on your way to pick up the ghosts. So what I'm going to do right now is divide you roughly in half, and half are going to go with Miss and Mrs. Woolley, and the other half we're going to escort into the Terner Gallery. When your show inside is over and your show outside is over, we trade. So no matter where you go first, you will see everything. And those of you who come out a little bit later to see outside, it will be just a little bit spookier because it will be a little bit darker, right? Okay? So if I were to walk like right here, I don't want to split up any families, right? So
See you again.
Now, my dear, I understand we can give you a little help since it is a bit difficult for the spirits to speak to the living. It's a little hard for the living to speak to the dead or to listen to the dead. So we've been giving something that can help. Electromagnetic device that they use to pick up voices. This is it. I think this is it.
I believe they call that a telephone. But there's no wire.
Hello?
Marvelous.
Do you talking to this?
Magic.
Hello. How do you hold? Do you know how to hold this? That's
right there. Just like this.
down there. Okay, thank you. Hello, and welcome to the History Ghost Walk of 2015. My first interviewer will be someone who was personally known by Abraham Lincoln. Now, does anyone know who Abraham Lincoln was? Who was Abraham Lincoln?
You know, he was the 17th president of the United States.
Oh, the 17th. Wow. Good news. All right. Well, presidents keep this United States in order, so let's meet William A. Newell, a physician and a former New Jersey governor, and was very personally known by Abe Lincoln and Mary Lincoln. Hello, William. Hi. Dr. Newell.
Some of you may think I bear some resemblance to Mr. Lincoln. We were close friends, but he had about 9 inches on me. I will try my best to answer questions and to respond. It's been a long time underground.
Yes, me as well. All right, now.
I can tell.
Thank you.
Well, no
Thanks.
offense, of course.
Oh, okay. Well, Dr. Newell, we know you best as the man who started the U.S. Life-Saving Service, the organization that became the Coast Guard. But you've
come back to tell us about your friendship with Abe Lincoln. How did you meet and become friends?
Love to tell this story, young lady. No, do we have about an hour? I'll keep it short then. I served 3 terms in Congress. In 1847, Abe Lincoln and I served in the Whig Party. Not this kind of wig. Obviously, this is real hair. The Whig WH Party. And we sat next to each other and saw eye to eye on many issues, including our opposition to slavery. But I believe our friendship became especially close when he supported my Newell Act, which, as you say, began the life-saving service. We placed lighthouses from Sandy Hook down to Cape May. Have you ever seen a lighthouse? You have! They're so well traveled. And as you say, from that point on, it became the Coast Guard, and we were able to save thousands of lives.
Now, how did the friendship change when Lincoln became president?
Well, you may be surprised to hear that New Jersey was very sympathetic to the South, but I remained a loyal supporter to the Lincolns. In 1860, when Lincoln was first nominated for president, I served as the delegate for New Jersey to the Republican Convention. And in 1864, we supported him for his re-election. I visited the White House many times, and in fact, I brought Mary here to Long Branch in 1861 to see one of our lighthouses and life-saving stations, where she could see the volunteers using the equipment and show off their skills.
Now, I know you practiced medicine throughout your life. Did you ever treat the Lincolns?
As you say, I practiced medicine in the 1840s and 1850s in a town called Manahawkin. Have you ever heard of Manahawkin? Yes. We used to say nobody's squawking when they leave Manahawkin. That's way back when. But that was before I went into politics. I actually served as the 18th governor of New Jersey. And when I returned to Washington, Mr. Lincoln was in his 2nd term. You may not realize this, but the Lincolns had 4 sons, 2 of whom died at an early age, Edward and Willie. And when Tad, their 4th son, came down with typhoid fever, I treated him, and he recovered. And from that point on, our bond remained very strong. Of course, we all know it was only a few months afterwards that President Lincoln was shot and killed in Ford's Theater. It was a tragedy that shocked the nation. I accompanied Mary on the 1,600-mile journey from Washington back to their home in Illinois, traveling through 7 states and 160 cities. Each one 1,000 mourners waiting hours to bid their final farewell to the president. Now, in the 114 years since I've died, I'm so happy to see that our president's legacy has remained. And I would like to say a hurrah to my old alma mater, the Fighting Chanticleers, Rutgers College. Are they not called that anymore? Oh, the Scarlet Knights. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yes. Well, Dr. Newell, you've both made history and witnessed it. Thank you for starting the life-saving service.
You're quite welcome.
And for your time in Congress and as our governor. And for coming back to tell us about your wonderful friendship with Abe and Mary Lincoln.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure, young lady. Thank you so much.
Hello, and our second person I will be interviewing today is a wife of a Union Army soldier named Jane Schenck, and she's here to tell us what life was like back when you were married to a soldier. Jane, your husband, Jacob Schenck, thought the South had the right to secede, yet he joined the Union Army. Why?
I'm sure that many of you in the 21st century probably think that New Jersey always sided with the Union. But of the northern states, New Jersey was the most conservative. Many of our businesses relied on the South. We sold many supplies to the southern states, and we were reluctant to lose that market. Politicians wanted to avoid the war and recognize the Confederacy. My husband was among those who wanted to avoid the war. He published a paper and was a printer. He thought that the war could be avoided, that it would hurt the Union. But when war broke out, people sided with the Union. My husband's views made him quite unpopular, so in 1862 he joined the Union Army to prove his loyalty.
Now, it seems like Jacob was a very opinionated man. Now, how did he do in the Army?
Why, my husband was a smart man with many talents. His commanding officer saw that and appointed him to deliver messages to and from Washington. It took less than 6 months for him to be promoted to second lieutenant. In 1863, Jacob's regiment was heading up to Gettysburg when they were called back to Monmouth County. Their enlistment was up and they were mustered out of the army.
Now, did Jacob ever change his mind about the South?
Well, my husband, like most soldiers, wrote home often. He didn't write about politics, though. He mostly spoke on his life in the army and asked about details from home. Our daughter Ida was still young when he left, and I was expecting our second child. Our son was born while Jacob was away, so as you can imagine, he wanted to hear from home. Though I must admit some of my husband's letters were rather bitter. He found it hard in his heart to believe in Mr. Lincoln's war.
Now, did you share your husband's views?
Oh, you must understand, it was a complicated time for many. I'm told even Mary and Abraham Lincoln didn't see eye to eye on the war.
Jane, your story has opened our eyes to a part of history that is not often told. Thank you for returning home and telling your story.
Thank you.
Our third and final guest of my interviewing is a general, a Civil War hero, and a U.S. ambassador to France. His name, General Horace Porter. Hello.
Good afternoon.
General, you led a fascinating life over several careers. Tell us about your role in the war.
Well, I graduated from West Point in 1860. So when the war began, I was already in the Army. I then was, excuse me. I was already in the Army. And then I fought in many battles during the war. I was in the Battle of the Wilderness and the Battle of Chickamauga. As a matter of fact, in 1902, I was awarded the Medal of Honor for my part in the Battle of Chickamauga. Later in the war, for about the last year, I became the aide-de-camp to General Grant and was with him at Appomattox when General Lee surrendered.
Now, what did you do after the war?
Well, after the war, I was still in the Army, and I remained in the Army for quite some time. But I became an aide to then President Grant when he was elected to the White House, and I served him throughout his term as president. Then I retired from the Army and did many different things. I was actually in business for quite a while, and I was the president of the Pullman Coach Company. Then I became the U.S. ambassador to France.
And now tell us about your role in giving two American heroes proper resting places.
Well, that's interesting. You know, I was ambassador to France when I found out that John Paul Jones, the American Revolutionary War hero, actually died in France and was buried there. It took me 6 years to find Admiral Jones, have him removed and brought back to the United States and buried at the Naval Academy at Annapolis. It's interesting because I must have been on a tear with that. It's actually very interesting because I also was working with the group that formed to honor President Grant after his death. And ultimately, we raised enough money to build Grant's tomb in New York City. And I was at the dedication of that. I spoke at the dedication along with President McKinley, also a Civil War veteran.
Now, Mr. General, Porter, you led an amazing life and even made news after you died. Thank you for returning and telling your story.
Thank you.
Here you go, Mother.
Well, that was wonderfully done, daughter. Very well done. And she is quite talented, isn't she? And she is nearing the marrying age as well, if we have any gentlemen that are interested. Yeah, perhaps not this time. Now, I have the pleasure to introduce to you a woman who was a nurse during the Civil War. And she had quite a few responsibilities, Mrs. Mary Dunbar. Now, is it Mrs. Dunbar or is it Nurse Dunbar?
Nurse Dunbar.
I know this is a bit challenging, isn't it? Hey, Nurse Dunbar, now I have heard that men were nurses during the Civil War, but women were nurses during the Civil War?
Well, you are correct. During the war, women weren't usually allowed. It was mostly men, like Walt Whitman. However, 2 months after the start of the war, Dorothea Dix was appointed superintendent of women nurses. By the end, over 3,000 women served.
Yes, I've heard of this Mrs. Dorothea Dix. I heard she was a no-nonsense woman. Now, what were nurses like in the Civil War?
Well, Dorothea Dix, like you said, was a no-nonsense leader, and she set down strict rules. For instance, no woman under 35 could serve because they were thought to be a distraction to the men. You were not allowed to wear hooped skirts like that. You were not allowed to wear jewelry, and you had to wear plain colors like brown or black.
I see. Now, what were your duties? What did you have to do as a nurse?
Well, you would think that we served to, help them with their wounds and stuff like that. However, we served more to their spiritual needs. We read to them, and we wrote letters, and we just had conversations with them. And it was a horrible, bloody, gruesome war. There were amputations, many deaths. It was awful. And by the end, around 620,000 were dead. It was haunting. It still haunts me today.
Oh, my goodness. Well, what was your life like after the war?
I mean, it's hard for me to talk about. I moved to Long Branch with my husband, and we had no children, and after he died, I really struggled. And I was 68 when I died in 1887, and I was buried in the First Methodist Church in West Long Branch. However, my grave marker has faded throughout the years, and in 2013, a group of volunteers made a new one for me, so now any of you can come and visit me.
Lovely. Well, you had quite some challenges in your life. Now, perhaps some of you will take up Mrs. or Nurse Dunbar's offer and go and visit her at the cemetery. Well, thank you, my dear, for sharing your story. And now we have Mr. and Mrs. John Morris. Now, Mr. John Morris was a farmer in Long Branch, and he also enlisted in the Union Army. Now, Mr. Morris, why did you enlist in the Union Army?
Well, the war started when I was just 16. The war seemed far away because it was mainly fought down in the South, and it wasn't going too well for the Union.
I see. And, Mrs. Morris, certainly you must have written to your husband. What were some of the things that he told you when he wrote you back?
Well, John's letters were full of life in the Army. When they weren't fighting, which was most of the time, they were in camp. They had as many as 5 2-hour drills a day. They also cleaned the camp and tended to the horses.
Quite a bit of work to do. I hear that there's a saying that's very popular with the United States Army. What is it? Hurry up and wait. So, but in that sense, how did you deal with your boredom? How did you deal with all that waiting?
Well, mostly everyone can read and write, so we spend time reading books and writing letters home. We would sometimes get big packages filled with newspapers, magazines, and even books to help us deal with the boredom. Some companies had a musician or two, so we spent time sitting around a fire singing songs about home. We also loved playing games, cards, and sports, especially baseball.
And are you a baseball player?
Yes, I am.
I understand there's quite a few teams that are playing right now. One called the Mets, and one called the Cubs.
Never heard of that.
Well, neither have I. I've seen cubs behind our house, but as the cubs that I know. Well, now, Mrs. Morris, like many wives during the Civil War, many loved ones, I'm sure you were very, very worried about your husband being so far away. Did John see any fighting? Did he see any action?
Well, John first saw action when he was just 18. In September, their first year, they went on 144 members of his regiment and him went on a ship to New York City to help the police in case of riots, because there was fear that there were rioters if President Lincoln won the presidential election. Luckily, they were just fears. But on their way back, they were attacked by a Confederate ship, but luckily no one was harmed.
That's certainly good to hear. Now, such an amazing story. I want to thank you both for sharing such a story and giving us such a real sense of what life was like in the Union Army as well as on the home front. Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, we have Mrs. Joseph Taylor, who was the founding member, one of the founding members of the Middletown Ladies' Aid Society, a very charitable woman on the home front. Now, Mrs. Taylor, how did this Ladies' Aid Society help the war effort?
Well, with the men off fighting everywhere, we had to take care of things at home. We had to tend the farms, work the fields and factories. It was quite a lot of work for us, especially taking on the homework as well.
Well, yes, it was quite challenging. Now, the things that you collected for this Ladies' Aid Society, all of the items that you collected, how in the world did you manage to get them to the soldiers with all this fighting happening?
Well, we began the Ladies' Aid Society in Middletown, but ours was not the only one. There were thousands, wives, daughters, mothers, everyone we could get. We used our time preciously and gathered all the gifts we could get, such as food, clothing, and other necessities for the men. We joined forces with the U.S. Sanitary Commission, and we provide wagons and wagons and wagons of many different items. And we brought them out in the battlefield just so the men could use them.
Now, madam, in your opinion, do you believe that the Ladies' Aid Society and other societies that were in the northern states, do you believe they had an effect on the Civil War? Do you think that they helped?
Well, of course, the U.S. Sanitary Commission collected more than $25 million worth of aid, which is quite a lot for my days. I don't know about now. But we believe the U.S. Sanitary Commission began for the Red Cross. It inspired.
That's wonderful. Unfortunately, my dear, in the 21st century, it seems that we are still fighting wars.
Oh, that's horrible.
It almost seems as if nothing has changed, has it? However, some things are the same, where we do still help our soldiers in any way that we can, and also we women make great contributions as well, especially as soldiers. Well, thank you, my dear, for sharing your stories. And now, my friends, it is time for you to meet a special guest in the Terner Gallery. So if I may ask you to rise. And you may follow Miss Peggy.
Greetings to one and all. How wonderful of you to join us at the National Hotel on this momentous occasion. Our honored guests will be arriving soon and the excitement is building. I'm Catherine Taylor. My husband Moses extends his most sincere regrets, as urgent financial matters have kept him in New York. What a pity, as he is well acquainted with the President and has long been a staunch supporter of the Union cause. A few years ago, when Mrs. Lincoln came to Long Branch, her visit caused quite a stir. I hoped to call on her, but with all the planned festivities, I could barely catch a glimpse of her. There seems to be a slight delay. It's so difficult for them to get away from the White House these days. In the meantime, Miss Ellen will entertain us with a popular Stephen Foster tune, which I understand to be a favorite of the President's, My Old Kentucky Home. your mind?
Well, that's one of the issues that I have. You know, we're only days away. And you know, you can never be sure till the votes are counted.
You're not worried about McCullough. You don't think he really has a chance to win, do you?
Any candidate on a ballot at any time has a chance to win. Now, if you would have asked me in July or August, I would have said, he's the next president. But with our successes in the Atlanta campaign of General Sheridan's ride down the Shenandoah Valley and the victories that he's acquired there, I think has given our people some heart. And see that we are doing the right thing and that we are on the right course. So I'm hoping that the election will go our way.
Well, I need you to win this election. If you
Well-
don't win this election, there are some debts that I have concerns about. If you don't win, the creditors will be knocking at our door.
Molly, it's always creditors. You have me worried at times. We will take care of the creditors. I say if the election goes our way, we'll have a little bit more time with it. Should it go the other way, we will deal with it. We will go back to Springfield debt-free. I can tell you that. But you know what? One of the big concerns, as I said, is will he win? Will I win? Will we go home? I don't know whether you've noticed or not, but I've been talking to some of the ladies about the election. Well, you don't have the right to vote. You are a power in the election. Those ladies whose husbands are inclined to vote for me, I've encouraged them to make sure their men folk get out. But those ladies that tell me their husbands are supporting Little Mac, I tell them, see what you can do about keeping them home on election day. But you know, I mentioned about returning to Springfield should this election go against us. That's been on my mind too. I think back to that summer in 1839 when a Belle of Kentucky society chose in our fair city to live in. A lady who was rumored to have such beauty that it could cause a preacher to forget his prayers.
You remember that evening? At my
And I
sister
remember the
Elizabeth's
evening
home?
when I saw you and I said that statement is true.
I remember it very vividly. I said, Mr. Lincoln, would you like to dance with me?
Miss Todd, I would like to dance with you in the worst way.
And as I remember at the conclusion of our dance, I said, Mr. Lincoln, you are a man of your word. Could you just dance with me in the worst way?
Well, that was the start of our romance. As stormy as it was.
Bit rocky.
I know your family was strongly against our marriage.
Really, they said, what do you see in Lincoln? Marry somebody like Stephen Douglas. He's going someplace. I mean, Lincoln, he barely, clothes don't fit all that well. He barely owns the clothes on his back.
And at that time, I probably would have agreed with him, and did to a certain degree. But, you know, married, had 4 sons. I remember when Robert came along, our firstborn. I traveled through the streets of Springfield and people yelled to me, Lincoln, how does it feel being the father for the first time? And I said, greatly relieved, because you know the difference in height between Mrs. Lincoln and I was deeply concerned that the child was going to be born with one long leg and one short leg.
Well, speaking of sons, I think you need to speak with our son, Tad.
And what has he gotten into now?
You haven't heard? I understand on public days he goes to the end of the line and he tugs on someone's sleeve and he says, I'm Tad Lincoln, I'm the president's son, and for $1 I can get you to the head of the line.
Well, I admire his entrepreneurship. I did have a talk with him. Mr. Hay, my secretary, mentioned this. And I told him that he was to discontinue the practice. There was no one asked to pay to see their president.
And you haven't seen them riding Nanny through the halls of the White House?
Well, I heard the other day that the cart that Nanny pulls ran over the foot of the governor.
Oh, okay.
And he was a Democrat too, so it's all right. But, you know, he really loves that animal. He cares for it deeply. And he's with it all the time.
Well,
I know that the animal has a taste for your roses and your garden.
Yes, well, I heard the Death March playing this morning, and I looked out the window, and there were the boys digging up my rose garden again. I guess you didn't pardon Jack this time, because they had to hang him and bury him in my rose garden.
Poor Jack the doll. He's suffered more executions than anyone I know.
But what are you going to do about that?
Well, I guess I'm going to have to pardon him again. You know?
Or, what else could we do?
Well, I guess we'll have to post a guard around that garden.
I think that's a good idea.
Protect your roses.
Maybe 2 guards.
And protect Jack, you know.
My poor roses. The
Well,
goat's been eating them as well.
speaking of our children, I have to bring up something that I'm a little reluctant to do. I received a letter from Robert. He'll be graduating from Harvard in January. He'll be a lawyer. Have to take the bar, but he's not ready to do that or hang out his shingle yet, because he feels the sense of patriotism. He has been the subject of ridicule as the president's son, safely tucked away at Harvard. But he feels now, as an adult, as a responsible citizen, that his place is in the Army. He has even threatened, if I don't give my permission, to enlist under an assumed name. And I can't have that.
Not Robert, not my son. You know, the war will take our son, or sniper, or shrapnel, or typhus, the same as it took Willie. It takes hundreds of boys a day. And how will I ever forgive you? Most men, their firstborn is their favorite. You only blame Robert for being born, for trapping you in a marriage that's only given you grief and caused you regret.
I will see to it that Robert has an assignment safely.
And if the
behind
slaughter
the
Cold Harbor's on our hands, save his grant, God help us. We'll pay for the oceans of spilt blood and uncountable corpses. We'll be made to pay with our sons.
Do you think I don't feel the pain of all the sons that are lost? Molly, I think the heavens are draped in black because of the losses that we have sustained. Robert has the right to be a man. We must let him make that decision. I know this is part of the grief that you still carry for Willie. You must come to terms with that grief.
And if I don't, what will you do?
If I have to, that asylum that you see out that window on that hill, I will place you there.
Well, then you go ahead. You do it. You're going to have to lock me away this time if Robert is killed.
Robert will be safe. I will assure you of that. I'll put him on Grant's staff. Keep him behind the lines.
Tad and I, we've gone and we visited the soldiers' home. I saw what it was like. I wrote letters home to those poor mothers that lost their son. Who's going to write a letter to me? When I lose Robert, who's going to write a letter to me?
There'll be no letter, but I'll come to your side should that happen. Because, Molly, we have been together too long to let this tear us apart. We need to be together. We need to be strong. This war is coming to an end. We need to be husband and wife again. I have neglected you, I know that. But please, please come back to me.
Pardon me, Mr. President, but a message has arrived from the War Department.
Thank you.
More pressing matters, I suppose?
Secretary Stanton, you're going to have to forgive me, but this is a matter which I must attend to.
This has been an exciting day, which we will long remember. Let's send them off with a rousing song, When Johnny Comes Marching Home. Please sing along with us. When Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah, we'll give him a hearty welcome and hurrah, hurrah, much. Please join us in the next room for refreshments.
And as you're having your refreshments, come up and ask us questions. We'd love to answer them for you.
Loose the faithful lightning of his